Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation sponsored by the Society of Decision Professionals, which is entitled, So You Want to Be a Decision Professional? What it takes to be one and why you are so needed. I would like to now introduce you to our moderators for today's presentation. Our first moderator is George Cleveland from Red Hat, and who is also a member of the SDP Membership Council. George, welcome to today's Learning Exchange.
Thank you, Brig. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of SDP and everyone in attendance for today's webinar, I have the sincere pleasure of introducing our distinguished panel of decision professionals. Our first panelist is Dr. Eric Bickle, Academic Director of the Strategic Decision and Risk Management Program and Associate Professor and Director of the Graduate Program in Operations Research and Industrial Engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. Welcome to the webinar, Eric.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Ashley Burke, a Senior Decision Analyst and former colleague of mine from Intel Corporation. Welcome to the webinar, Ashley.
Thanks, George.
Thank you. Our next panelist comes to us from the world of pharma, but also has experience in oil and gas and utilities. Eric Johnson of Bristol Myers Squibb. Welcome to the webinar, Eric.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Carl Spetzler, Chairman and CEO of SDG and one of my decision analyst senseis. Welcome to the webinar, Carl.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you. Before we open the floor to questions, we've asked each of the panelists to discuss their unique career paths and share some general thoughts about careers in decision analysis. Let's start with Eric Bickle. Eric, you bring a unique perspective as both a professional and an academic. Can you share your thoughts on the field of DA, how you got into the field, as well as general thoughts on career paths for those who are interested?
Sure, happy to. So I got my PhD from Stanford in 1999. Ron Howard was my advisor. I joined SDG in 1995. Many of Ron's students would take a year off and practice. It was the idea of having a teaching hospital where you practice the theory that you're learning. And Carl hired me, and back in 95, I rejoined SDG full-time in 1999 before returning to academia in 2004. But I'm still a director at SDG, and I really think of myself as a pracademic or an academicianer. I like to be in both worlds. For me, I get ideas from practice, and I get to work on interesting things from a research perspective. In terms of career path and maybe some skills that are required, I think it depends quite a bit on the path that you want to follow. Academic path, an external consultant like at SDG, or in an internal DA position. And I think those paths are different, and preparation could differ, and what you need to do to be successful in each of those is certainly different. But if I was going to highlight one key skill, and what I think of as a decision analyst, I would say the ability to be incisive. To me, that is that's a necessary skill. It's not sufficient. We need to have many other capabilities, but the ability to quickly boil down a complex problem to its essence, I think of as really fundamental to what we do.
Great, thank you, Eric. Ashley, you've had an interesting path into our career field. I'm sure the audience would be interested to hear your thoughts on this field and how you got into DA. Could you share that with us?
Yes, happy to. So I bring actually a non-traditional or kind of different perspective for what it means to be a decision professional. I didn't come from academia, and I don't have a PhD, but personally I think that's okay. So in my opinion, every career is about making or facilitating decisions, whether or not you have the title of decision professional or decision specialist. Prior to joining Jim Driscoll's program office or decision quality program office at Intel, I actually spent years in finance at the company. So I had a variety of different roles with, functions ranging from budgets and planning to P&L management to product line analysis. And it was actually in my last role as a product line analyst that I spent some time in a training course with Jim and his team. And I kind of had this eye-opening experience where I realized all of the analysis that I'd been doing could actually be more impactful with decision quality. So it was subsequent to that class where I sat down, I talked with Jim, and his team in a little more detail. And I thought, this is something I need to be a part of. Here was this small group of very passionate people at Intel working together to change the culture of decision making. Now, cultural change is always a bit daunting, or it seems like a big hurdle. But I found that particular facet of what Jim and his team were trying to do as exciting. And I really wanted to be a part of that movement that they were trying to build. So I'm still a finance professional at Intel, but I joined Jim and his team. And since joining them, I said I'm not from academia, but I have received a lot of additional training. So I have my strategic decision-making and risk management certification from Stanford. And I've obtained a lot of hands-on experience as a decision practitioner within the walls of Intel. But I think, I'm a good example of a rather non-traditional path to this profession. And, I illustrate that there isn't a right way or one path to becoming a decision professional.
Thanks, Ashley. That's great perspective. Eric Johnson, you have such a breadth of experience across so many industries and roles. Could you share your career path and thoughts with us?
Sure. When I finished my BA, which was in philosophy, a friend from my college hired me as an entry-level regional planner at the electric utility. In that job, I encountered Ed Caslet's regional decision model, and I was fascinated at the way it worked. I told Ed I'd buy him lunch if he would tell me how I could get such a fun job as he had, working with such interesting tools. He said, well, go to Stanford and study decision analysis with Professor Howard. Buying him that lunch was the best investment I ever made. After finishing up at Stanford, I've been doing DA ever since, sometimes as a consultant, sometimes inside, for electric utilities, oil and gas, and pharma. I'm currently an internal consultant at Bristol-Myers Squibb, helping teams develop options for nine-figure drug development programs, create a composite team perspective on the value of those options, typically by eliciting expertise about what might happen, putting it in a Monte Carlo simulation model, and then drawing out the implications of this team perspective for the options. For instance, what kind of trade-offs are we facing among cost, timeline, probability of success, and potential upside? As it happens, my department at BMS does have an opening for the person to be my boss, and there'll be other openings soon. So go to the SDP's website at decisionprofessionals.com and click jobs to learn more. When I'm in a hiring role, I'm looking for someone who understands the job, the role, and wants all of it, including expert debiasing and elicitation, modeling, simulation, and analysis, identification and succinct communication of insights, and working with customers who may or may not completely get it.
Great. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that perspective. Finally, let's go to Dr. Carl Spetzler. Carl is an early pioneer in this field. Can you share your career path and thoughts on careers in decision analysis?
Sure. First, let me say I think the choice of this kind of career is probably closer to what Ashley experienced for many of us. There's somewhere in this you get an aha. For me, it was when I did my dissertation, and after my dissertation had an opportunity to help Standard Oil of Indiana in making one of its biggest decisions of whether or not to go nationwide with unleaded gasoline before it was required by government. And here I was with this new set of tools, and it felt like I was the only one that had power tools, even though I was still in my 20s. And amazingly, I was able to actually have help a board of directors make a decision they'd been cycling on for a number of years. And I went home to my wife and I said, Letha, I know what we're going to do, what I'm going to do professionally. And we had 2 little kids already, and I was still in graduate school, and she was obviously interested. And I said, I'm going to help executives make decisions. And she looked at me and says, aren't they the ones that know how? Well, that was my career switch. I've been doing it ever since. But this idea of, yes, executives already think they know how ends up being one of the big challenges for anyone that goes into this career. The career path seems to be either helping others make decisions or learning, like many of the people like Ashley that graduated with an SDRM program. University of Texas, Eric Bickle now has one, that they get attached to it. They say, wow, this is really powerful. I want to use it in my current job, and becomes part of my mix as, let's say, a marketing professional or a IT professional. Or they say, I really want to go do this mostly. How do I get on this career path of becoming a internal decision support specialist or decision specialist in some way? We also see now that this competence is so core to many of the executive functions that people that build this early in their career then become senior executives. So when I talk to Pfizer, who has a strong internal group, they say, well, our big adoption has increased because many of the people that have worked in this group have now become senior executives and are the decision makers, and they wouldn't be without it. So I think all of this kind of comes together. The career choices today are many more this way than they have been in the past. And I think companies have very different perspectives on being aware already that they're looking for it, or whether you're in a missionary position trying to convert them. And I think that needs to get into this discussion somewhat as well. So let's go into a further discussion in response to some of the questions.
Great, thank you, Carl. With that, I'd like to open the questions to the audience. If you have questions, please use the question feature on the side of the chat and let us know. Dan, what's our first audience question for our panelists?
Thanks, George. Looks like the first question we have here is, what generic advice do you have for students who might be looking to join the industry?
Well, so a student at what level, you know, I think if you're an undergraduate in operations research and you've just found this, it's very different than if you are a mid-career professional and you have just finished and the company has paid you to get a certificate in strategic decision and risk management. I think those are 2 different starting points. Do you have a sense of which question you're asking?
No, there's no specificity there. So perhaps if the panelists could maybe consider both perspectives and providing a response, that would be, I think, probably helpful for the group.
This is Eric Johnson. I've had the pleasure to co-author the Handbook of Decision Analysis. And if you are looking at a career as a practicing decision analyst, that would be one of the good books that you could look at. And I know it's pricey, and I apologize for that. I didn't control it. But there are others. I know Carl has got his book on decision quality as well that you can have a look at. But I think that comes maybe second path, and the ambiguity in the question, I think the interesting part of the question is earlier, before you've really decided whether to whether to become a decision professional? How do you get a flavor of it? And is there some book that you could just pick up and have a look at and decide whether to even go take the SDRM course? I'll be interested to hear what the other panelists think. One you may want to look at is Pat Leach's book, Why Can't You Just Give Me the Number, which is, to me, an entertaining read with a selection of different anecdotes or topic areas that give you a flavor of how DA plays in a corporate environment.
Yeah, this is Eric. I could add to it a bit. And I think, as Carl said, depends where you are in the career path. If you're early on and you're a student, undergraduate, let's say, decision analysis for the most part is a graduate degree. And so the choice there would be doing that through generally engineering or business. And, there's some differences there, kind of what the types of the way you like to learn is different between the two, and maybe the types of problems you like to work on. But by and large, you're going to have to, there's going to be other topics other than decision analysis. There's really not a degree just in that. In operations research, there'd be other quantitative topics you'd cover, and then through a business school, there'd be other topics as well. If you're, have already have a degree and get turned on by this, like so many of us did, I think the decision would be go back to school, get a formal degree, or pursue a certificate. And I think for most folks, the certificate makes a lot more sense. If you're really passionate about DA and decision quality, as I said, going back to school, you're going to have to go through many other courses as well to get to the stuff that you're really turned on by.
Eric, to piggyback on that a little bit, the kind of people that get excited about this, that come, for example, to the certificate programs and they take one or two courses and now they're excited, it kind of what the transformation that happened with Ashley, and I'd love to hear her point of view on it. But they tend to then decide whether they want to leverage it in their current functional job to advance. So, and they get a lot of value out of it, but they don't necessarily think of themselves as becoming a decision specialist. They become a risk manager with a decision specialty capability that makes them better at it. And then the other is where you really become an internal consultant or an external consultant. Can be one or the other, but you're helping people make better decisions in certain domains. You get some real depth, whether it's in let's say technology decisions or big capital expenditure decisions and things of this sort. But these two career paths are pretty different, and I think one thing that needs to be noted is some organizations have built a whole career ladder internally, where you can start out and learn internal to the organization and be mentored and develop to different levels of decision professional skills. Ashley, how does that decision in terms of becoming, there have been a lot of people taught in Intel, okay? And some of them get the bug like you did. And what do other people do with it?
Yeah, so thanks, Carl. I think one of the things when I think about, when people ask me, how did you decide that you wanted to, pursue a career with decision quality or decision analysis, or how do I know if that's right for me in the career that I would want to pursue? A lot of times I just say, well, first of all, you're already doing it, right? You're already in a career that's focusing on decision quality in some way. So embrace it, right? I mean, be decision focused in your role today in your organization and the personal decisions that you face, and then make the career what you want it to be. So find something you're passionate about. For me, I pursued a business background. I was passionate about business. I was, very passionate about my finance career. And then it just so happened I came across this, internal organization that was driving decision quality. But I would have pursued it within my functional discipline, even if Jim's program office, didn't exist, right? Because I didn't need to have the title of decision specialist. I would have taken the principles and I would have been able to apply them, right? Decision quality isn't the end itself, it's the means to an end. And so I would have done that within my existing role. For me, hearing what Jim was trying to drive in terms of this cultural change effort, that was something I wanted to be a part of. So becoming a decision specialist within Intel and, having that be my focus, right, and everything that entails from teaching to consulting different GMs and VPs was fortunate for me at the time. But I think it's definitely, you can make a decision career wherever you sit within an organization. If you're a student sitting in school, find something that you're passionate about doing and then bring decision quality to it, right? You don't have to look for that one job title that says decision specialist. Do what you want to do, and there will be an application for decision quality.
Mm-hmm. Eric, can I ask you that fits with this question, and just to follow up, what kind of people does Bristol-Myers Squibb look for to bring into their decision analysis group?
When we're hiring, normally we either see an advanced degree in science or a quantitative MBA, and so I'm one of the few who had training that was focused in decision analysis. So we get the scientists and the quantitative MBAs, and we send them to the certificate program.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key point there, at least for me, is they got to wanna. They have to. There's a fundamental drive that I think many of us feel that of the value of rational thought, of focusing what your activities are on achieving your goals. And it's sort of tricky and sort of interesting, and it calls on a variety of different expertise, which is sort of a fun thing to do. And I think it's that drive to facilitate that good decision making within a team structure, typically, that to me is the primary criterion that we'll judge the candidates on. And if they haven't been to the certificate program yet, well, we'll send them. If they're interested in getting it, they'll get it.
Eric, we kind of have a similar philosophy, which is, we can send people to a certificate program, right? We can teach you DA, but really looking for that drive, applying decision quality, or even more broadly speaking at Intel, where we're trying to change the way decisions are made at Intel. It's not always easy. In fact, oftentimes it's hard. And so, when we hire people, we want people that want to lean into that challenge versus step away. And the decision analysis, we can teach them that.
That must be, this is Carl. That's what I heard from Bill Klimak. I heard it from Pfizer. I've heard it from others. That is, we find the right kind of people and we can teach them the decision quality skills that are necessary. And the right kind of people have this sense that Eric brought up of really looking for incisiveness, wanting commitment to rationality, but at the same time being very open and forward-looking in the future. So for a certain group of people, the decision quality paradigm has things that they've struggled with in their life fall into place and saying, yes, that's the way you should do it. And then they want to apply it. And I think that's what we're all looking for. And I think, in fact, the Society of Decision Professionals attracts that. That's really the center of who we are, and what makes us enjoy each other is that we have that given commitment to making high quality decisions as a means to the end of getting the most of what people really want, whether we do it in society, on societal decisions, or on personal decisions, or on business decisions, in all those areas.
Maybe I should I'll just briefly mention, for those of you who don't know Bill Klimak, who Carl mentioned, Bill leads the program at Chevron, and that is one of the places that has the DA career ladder. And I think it's fascinating to take a look at companies like Chevron or Pfizer or Intel or to some extent Lilly, where they've built that in over the years and have that kind of DA built into the DNA of the company.
So this is a great discussion. As a moderator here, I'm tending to kind of sit back and let the panelists kind of drive this discussion and let it evolve organically, which I think is happening. Before we shift into addressing some of the other questions that are coming in from the audience, a specific question while we were talking about education programs came up, and someone was interested in various master's and PhD programs that might be out there. So I just want to call attention to the audience. If you visit SDP's website at decisionprofessionals.com, you'll see that there's a tab titled Courses. And if you follow that tab, you'll see that there are various professional training programs. We've already talked about the Strategic Decision and Risk Management Certificate Program. That's one of them there. But you'll also see that you can find links to various university programs that have a master's or PhD level education in decision analysis. So I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Okay. One of the questions that came in, I think it stemmed from some of the preliminary comments that Ashley made about changing culture. And so this individual was curious about how you actually go about changing that culture among executives in practice. Any panelists have some thoughts on that?
Well, I've been trying to do it for 50 years. And I think it's unique in every situation. I'm working with one organization right now where one of the key senior leaders actually went and got the full certificate from the program, and he has the influence with the CEO and the organization to basically drive this change. That's the ideal. You don't have that very often. I think Ashley can probably give us a pretty good sense. Eric, you guys have the culture more on the development side. I think, I'm not sure it's on the commercial side. What are the challenges you're seeing? I think all those comments would be helpful.
So I can jump in and start, but what I've seen at Intel, both from my own personal perspective as well as, watching Jim and the rest of our team, we've had to evangelize decision quality, right? It's not something, if it were as easy as sitting our top executives down and saying, here's decision quality, this is the way to do things, it's so much better this way. And then they said, oh yeah, that sounds great, we're on board, let's do it. We wouldn't need our jobs. But we've really pursued cultural change from kind of the ground up. So we do a lot of things, and we try to have those things reinforce one another. So, a big part of what we do is we teach a portfolio of classes, including but not limited to decision quality as well as modeling and assessment. And we do that to employees across all disciplines, across all of Intel. We do a number of different community events. So people will see us and hear from us both through internal corporate events, but also events that are external to the company. And we'll bring our community with us to those external events even. And sometimes they're fun events. Sometimes they're partnering with other organizations like the Decision Education Foundation. But we try to show up in those places. And then where we do have the ear of a GM or a VP, we partner with them in their organizations, and we consult on decision projects and strategic initiatives that they're driving. But the idea is we come at this notion of cultural change from multiple angles, and all of those different things, whether we're consulting or teaching or doing a community event, they reinforce and they help build that momentum across the organization. Because it's not as simple, right, as just sitting down with a leader and saying, you know, here's decision quality, it's the better way, do it. You really have to build that momentum and that swell from the ground up.
Well, I think that's a fascinating answer you've given, Ashley. And one of the things that I was listening for, and you kind of answered it there, was when I look from the outside, what's interesting about Intel is that there's hundreds and hundreds of people have taken DA, including, as near as I understand it, fairly senior people have taken DA courses. And so I look at my company, well, our senior executives have not taken DA, and suppose we went and said, here's a DA course, would you like to take it? They'd probably say, well, no, thank you, I'm busy deciding. So how do you, and the way I think I'm hearing you say is that you built that culture that they wanted to take it. Am I correct that the senior people take the DA course?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah, we have senior individuals come through.
So do you have a sense of which parts of this mix of activities that you're doing that's working that way, or it's just that having them all there is building the culture?
Yeah, I think it's having them all there, right? It kind of creates this fabric of support versus pointing out, like, you know, it's because we teach courses, that's what drives them to it. There's not one element, in my opinion. But if you have a senior individual, right, and they have enough of their direct staff that's coming to them and saying, you know, I took this course on decision quality, you know, here's what I learned, or they just start applying the principles, and then the senior leader says, you know, oh, what is this? Or they become more exposed to it. It becomes ingrained, and they almost realize they want to learn more without us explicitly telling them. Or, you know, you might have an instance where they have a peer, right? And their peer is applying decision quality or some facet because their organization was exposed to it. They took the training, and it becomes reinforcing that way. So creating the opportunity for learning and exposure through many different channels, I think, makes the likelihood that you're going to see this, you know, senior level support and interest much greater, and it drives awareness rather than just pursuing, you know, one channel, right? You're increasing your opportunities for exposure.
To tie this back to a bit of this whole, you know, in someone that is considering how much do I want to make this part of my career path, both either explicitly to become a decision specialist or building it into my function or role. I think that if you have a culture that already has gotten to the level of where it is a pull-through, where senior executives and decision makers say, I want that kind of support in making decisions, the career environment is very different than when you're in the proselytizing mode to try to get to that flipping point, let's say. And then we have people that have graduated with an SDRM program, and it was paid for by the company, but nobody had any real idea of what this was about. When they paid for it, it just sounded good. And then the individual becomes a real champion. And in fact, a number of people that have become such real champions have gone back to their organizations and were so intense, tending to make the conversion happen, that after they knocked themselves against the wall for a year or two, they left the company and went somewhere else where they're practicing it. people become champions, and getting to that first point of winning decision makers that appreciate it and get it enough is so difficult. And the reason it's difficult is because it requires a mindset shift on the decision maker's part. And that's where this culture meets career path. That's how it all kind of comes together for me. I think Eric has knocked himself out on this a number of times too. What are your thoughts on this subject?
Which Eric? Are you talking about?
Oh, I was thinking Eric Bickle. He's both an educator and a consultant, and having tried to make some of that change.
Yeah, I think it's the path is quite a bit different depending on the direction that you want to take. I think for the culture, improving the culture, Ron relayed an analogy to me a long time ago that organizations are sort of like raisin bread, and you need some good raisins in there, some people who are really passionate about driving this, and I would say that are also trained to a deep level in terms of the decision quality, decision analysis, so that they can handle the questions and the challenges that are naturally going to come up. But you need some of those, I think, hubs to really push it.
Okay, that was a great discussion that we had there. I think we'll shift gears and move on to another question here. You guys have already touched upon a lot of the questions that we're getting in here. A lot of it centered around the culture issue, or maybe they've had some success with some small projects, a limited number of projects, and they're interested in expanding the use of DA within their organization. I think you guys have been touching upon some of the ways to go about doing that. One question that I found to be interesting and current of current interest is, what impact on the decision analysis profession do you see with the evolution of big data? And I thought this was particularly timely because just last week, Pat Leach led an SDP-sponsored webinar on big data and talked a bit about some of the potential pitfalls of relying upon it. Any panelists have any ideas about that and the impacts on the DA profession of big data?
This is Eric. I could say a little bit about it, and that that's quite an active academic area as well. And so I'm seeing a lot of that on campus, and also just organizationally within our campus in terms of talking about the relevance of what we do versus what's happening in statistics or computer science. So first thing I'd say, I think we could all do a better job of integrating data. DA really came about in a time where we didn't have a lot of data and relied a lot on expert elicitation, and I still think that's important, critically important, but I think we could embrace some of the data aspects as well. But the point I try to make is that if you just go back to what we've all learned, any decision has three components: alternatives, information, and preferences. And really what mostly the big data folks are about in statistics or computer science, it's about the information component. And the only field that I know that deals with all three components and integrates them is decision analysis. So we're as relevant as ever. You still need somebody to put all this together and drive it towards a decision.
To piggyback on what you just said, Eric, I think the perspective of someone that is a decision specialist, decision professional, or decision analyst is fundamentally different than someone that starts with the data. If you're starting with my capability is to analyze data, then you're looking for insights from the data. If you're starting with a decision, you will follow whatever is relevant to helping make that a higher quality decision. And it may be in the big data, in which case all this technology around big data and big data itself, the ability to operate on it, has become quite enabling of new decisions that and new opportunities and so on. But very often you'll start with a decision and you won't find yourself going to big data. You'll find yourself looking forward to saying, what's the rapid transformation that we expect in this industry, looking forward for the 5 years, and it's a huge disruption, and you won't find it in the past data. So I think it's enabling. It's very important for us to understand, but it is a different perspective from someone that starts with, what is the decision we're trying to make, as opposed to start, boy, have we got a lot of data about our customers that we never had accessible before. What else can we learn from that? Okay, those are two different perspectives.
I agree with that, Carl, and it's interesting how two of the industries where DA has taken hold are R&D flavored, which is oil and gas and pharma. And many of the skills that we learned are skills of dealing with expertise where there is, quote, not much data, unquote. That makes sense in an R&D flavored industry, because there's data about other compounds that may or may not be indicative of what my compound is going to do. And there's data about someone else's hole, but it doesn't tell you whether there's oil in my hole. That's where you need the expertise, the expert who is familiar with the data, who knows at what point is pertinent and can be relied upon, and when it needs to be adjusted and when it needs to be discarded or disregarded because it's not pertinent to the situation at hand. I think those of us who've grown up in the expertise-facing world are facing an important challenge, because as we get better and better at data, the prevalence of cases where the data can be disregarded or where it just doesn't apply so well is getting smaller. And I think the role of big data has probably got to expand, but I think it will never push away the importance of having a human expert who groks the whole situation and whose expertise is then mined by the decision professional to bring it to bear on the new decision context that we're creating.
Mm-hmm. Can I introduce Dan, a question here in a way? I'm noticing two professions in particular, the finance professionals, like Ashley's background, and the risk management professionals are moving in the direction of becoming decision specialists, either integrating into their field or actually becoming decision specialists. So in a way, what Ashley went through, I see very broadly. To be a strategic finance professional, you should have significant decision quality competence. Ashley, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, what drew me to decision quality, or DA, was that it was an extension of, or it allowed me to better perform a lot of what I was doing, right? So in my role as a finance professional, I was doing Monte Carlo analysis, but when I sat through the decision quality course and I kind of saw this comprehensive approach, right, and this goal of achieving decision quality, to me, that took me to the next level with what I was doing for finance, right? It was going to allow me to have my analysis be more impactful.
Well, there are a huge number of finance professionals that what you just said, if they understood that, they would say, this has to become part of the way we do strategic finance. Okay, if finance professionals are not just control focused or black and white backward looking, If they're really forward-looking, decision quality becomes central. The same thing is happening with risk management professionals. Risk management professionals have redefined risk in ISO 31000 to include the upside. So now they're dealing with the full range of uncertainty. Once you do that, then what we are talking about here as a career and as a competence becomes central if you want to be a real risk management professional. Now, all of this is converging, but I think that's where a lot of the career opportunities are. That people really, as they're waking up to what role decision-making and decision quality plays, they become really decision specialists within a title structure that might be, you know, your enterprise risk management professional, or you are a finance professional or something like this. I'd like to hear others whether they agree with that trend that I'm seeing.
In particular, let me point out that we do have a risk management professional on the line, and Dan, can I
Yeah.
suggest maybe you step out of your moderator role and address that?
Yeah, Eric, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not in a risk management role per se. I am a reliability and risk analyst at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So in my current role, I'm primarily involved with the development of probabilistic risk assessment models that we use to inform decision making and to prioritize our risk management strategies. So I see myself in more of an analytical supporting role at this point, but I have seen for quite some time the value of developing competence around decision quality, and it was a strong driver for why I became a member of the society. And I hope as my career progresses, I'm going to be an internal champion of decision quality within the agency.
Good.
Sorry, Carl, I think I took your question a bit aside. Because you're sort of challenging the panel.
No, I'm just, I wonder, Eric, do you see, well, in your world, you don't see, so, for example, are the finance professionals at Bristol Myers Squibb seeing themselves as strategic finance professionals? This category of whether they're strategic or not, okay, is really whether people in the finance organization of an organization are the black hats and have a control mentality, or are part of the in participation in terms of significant forward-looking decision support. If they're of that strategic decision-focused role, then decision quality is like, it fits just the way Ashley described it. If someone is in a control mindset and has the attitude, the judgment and forward-looking stuff, anybody can make that up, and people will just use that to lie. Our job is to make sure that we're truth-telling, and we're fundamental. We have to measure everything, and it has to be factual. Then you're caught not in the forward-looking strategic perspective of finance. You're caught in the kind of control mentality. And I think those are hugely different. Especially in some companies, I found that the control mentality is so strong that the finance organization would not tolerate having someone that has more of the decision quality perspective. There you have to build it outside. If you're going to get decision quality, you're going to get it in the strategy organization, or you're going to get it in some other part of the organization. So I think in terms of career paths, as people move into forward-looking, decision-oriented roles, whether they're in the support organization or they are the actual decision makers, that's when they recognize this is like the key that makes things fall into place, and that's where the opportunities are.
Thank you very much, Carl. So we only have time for perhaps one more question, and there's been some interest among participants around pursuing a career as an independent or external consultant in decision analysis. Any parting words of wisdom for that individual who may be looking to start up their own business, who their target audience might be, and how they go about getting started?
Well, I'll say this much. This is kind of like asking somebody that just graduated from medical school and hasn't had a residency yet, what would you do to start your own business as a doctor? And I'd say go study under somebody that knows how. The decision profession is as much of a practice as it is a understanding the theory and the concepts. So the practice or the clinical experience is very fundamental. And I think that if you want to start your own, I think learn some, and that's what's happening, by the way. You know, you get people being in Chevron, having been in that role for 5 or 10 years, and so excited about doing that and saying, I want to do it beyond, and then they leave and they start their own. And there are a lot of individual consultants and some small groups and organizations like SDG. But first you got to know enough to want, at least you have to be at the lead practitioner level in the society that we have. And whether you got the certification or not, I'm not worried, but you have to be able to do that before you hang out your shingle with integrity that I can help you make better decisions.
Yeah, I'd add, this is Eric. Oh.
Go ahead, Eric.
I'll just go quick, Eric, and you can go. I think it'd be a great experience to do that. It'll teach you the importance of cash flow and help you appreciate, I think, the challenges the decision makers face. So when we tell them, you know, the NPV is, you know, this huge, but you know, they say they're not going to make it through next quarter. You have a better appreciation, I think, for that. Some of the real world trade-offs that have to be made.
Can't top that. That's a great comment.
All right. Any last perspectives on that topic? Okay. Well, thank you so much. I want to take this opportunity to extend my sincere gratitude to our 4 panelists who took time out of their busy schedules to share some valuable insights and perspectives with us today. And I also want to thank those of you who participated in the webinar who clearly have an interest in learning more about what it takes to be a successful decision professional. For those of you who are not already members of our society, you can look forward to a follow-up email from us. We're going to just reach out to you and share with you a little bit more about some of the benefits and opportunities that come with being a member of SDP, and we look forward to future interactions with you. So with that, I'll go ahead and conclude this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's Learning Exchange. I'd like to thank our presenters again for their time and contributions to today's event, and also all the great questions that were posed to our panelists. I'd like to remind you that you may find the replay of this webinar and all previous webinars in the Society's member-only section of the website at decisionprofessionals.com. Thank you for being with us today, and you may now disconnect.